Alright, just going to wait a couple minutes to let folks join the stream before we get started. It's going to just be bug fixing today. The kind of stuff that will hopefully let us jump around in the code base, a couple of different spots, and each one should take, I would guess, 15 minutes or so. So yeah, I'm going to wait maybe 5 more minutes and then we can get going. Feel free to talk to me through the chat. I'll have that thing open while we go. If I could figure out how to get music to play on this thing, I would. Does anybody hear that? Just turned on my iTunes there, but I don't know if anybody else hears it or if it's just me. Okay, no music then. How's it going, Jim? I guess on the plus side, that means I can listen to whatever music I want. And y'all won't have to hear it. Alright, why don't I go ahead and get this going. Alright, so first bug. 1034, downloads menu / button loses focus while a download is running. I pretty much straight away knew what this was going to be. So if we jump over to the downloads page, there's this menu right at the top left, which I'm pretty sure the problem is that this thing is getting closed whenever the page re-renders. Page will start to re-render if you download something, so like how about I jump over to Hyperdot. And download it. And the download should get started, and then, yep, look at that. So the menu keeps on getting closed whenever this thing re-renders the page. And that's because some state is not getting captured. Now, the way our drop-downs work are not exactly my favorite piece of code, but they work well enough. Let's stick this guy a little bit more over the corner. So, I had to make my screen resolution a little bit lower than I normally prefer to fit everything nicely and so that my computer doesn't die again. So, let's jump over to the downloads page and we can see what element is being run here. The download page is basically, we have a set of built-in pages inside of Beaker which are almost like miniature web apps. And the downloads page is one of them. So we got this render header function. We're using Yo-Yo, which is sort of like React, but it uses template strings. And so we got this render header function, which is calling a component that is standard for all the built-in pages. The built-in page is nav, and so here is that drop-down code. Maybe get a little smaller so we can see more. So we have the drop-down code here, and then there's a toggleable helper, and that's what's having a problem. This toggleable is not maintaining the open state. So we have a little convenience on this thing where you set data toggle ID on the element and then it'll persist the state between renders, and that's really what we want. So this is not going to be the most interesting bug fix to look at. It's going to be, let's see, is it on the button or on the, yeah, on the element. Alright, data toggles ID. Just need to add an attribute so that it can know how to track the state. That's all there is to this one. Toggle ID equals as soon as that finishes recompiling, we can test it. Alright. So it still works, and if I download something again, we should see. There we go. Easy bug fix. Let's get that committed. Oh, that's no good. Persist the built-in pages nav across page renders. Close 1034. One bug down. What next? Okay. How about this one? Copy, select text from file, and the... no, that one may be a little complicated. What's going to be fun to fix? Let's check out this one. Swipe left icon while using the MacBook Pro. Getting stuck. Alright, so we pulled a little UI behavior from Chrome so that if you use the swipe left or swipe right on the page, well, and there's not even working there, you should be able to see some swipe gestures sort of appear at the edge of the screen, and then you can go back or forward. So let me try to, there it is. And what this person is telling me is that sometimes it gets stuck on the screen, so that it like sticks right there even though he's let go. Which I'm not sure what could be causing that. I don't seem to be having any luck reproducing it. Doesn't seem to be wanting to happen to us. But I figure what we can do is just poke around in the code, find a way to basically put in like a, okay, no matter what, if a certain amount of time passes and this thing should be gone but it hasn't, then just get rid of it. So sort of a hack. Since I can't reproduce it, it's going to be pretty hard to figure out what the actual bug is. So here's the code for that. Swipe handler, it's inside of the shell window. And this has some fun logic for tracking what registers to us as a mouse wheel event that's horizontal. That's how that gets interpreted by the browser. And so we have this code to... Alright, I'm going to have to think for a second. There's scroll touch end, which is probably when this thing should be, that's when the resetting occurs. Yeah, alright, so I'll step through the logic just to, so everybody can learn about this. So first of all, we have the window event that you got to watch for where scroll touch begin occurs, and that's when somebody first starts scrolling. And that's when we initialize all of these sort of logic for tracking the swipe. We do some kind of funky stuff where we actually grab... yeah, okay, so we have this logic here which looks underneath the cursor and tries to check if it looks like you're actually scrolling on an element inside of the page, and if you are, we don't do anything. It's not exactly the best logic, because sometimes that just means at times you wouldn't expect the swipe left, swipe right doesn't work, and there's a number of reasons why I sometimes think we ought to get rid of the swipe left and swipe right, just because it doesn't always work out perfectly. But we got it now. We're going to try to fix up this one particular bug. So the scroll start initializes the behaviors, and then scroll end, if we have been scrolling, either does they go back or go forward if it looks like they went far enough, and then it resets the state of these UI elements. While it's going, it tracks the mouse wheel event and then basically tries to track how far you've traveled. And if you've gone, let's see, there's a function we have, should go back, right? So we basically have a range of how far you should go, and that's what the H normalized ends up telling you. So if you go past the trigger distance, you get this value that's either going to be between -1 or 1, and if it's all the way to -1 or 1, then we say, yep, you went far enough. Alright, so that's all hopefully sort of interesting. And now I need to come up with a way that's sort of a surefire way to make sure that it never gets stuck. Now, why might it be getting stuck? Could be because the scroll touch end event is not firing. Could be that something is throwing an exception prior to the reset code. So it is firing, but this code doesn't get run. Could be that the is touching value is getting reset at the wrong time, but it doesn't look like there's anything that would do that. Let's jump into the debugger real quick and see if it's possible that... There we go. Actually, the debugging may not be the best. We may just need to stick some console.logs in there, because I don't know if we want to pause execution every time. Yep, that does run. So if it's throwing an exception for this other user, it's not doing it to us. That code is getting run. Scroll touch in. Let's take a look at the report real quick. I think they're running the same operating system that I am. I'm guessing that means Mac OS 10.13.4. Interesting. Alright. So one option is to just stick a timer on this thing and basically say if you've taken longer than, 4 seconds to do this swipe gesture, you've taken too long, and we just run the reset right then. Certainly one way to do it. I don't think... Maybe, actually 4 seconds may even be too generous. It may be more like 2 seconds. Or maybe even just 1. But 1 might be a little long. Or short, rather. Yeah, what it'll mean is that whatever I do, if I set it so that you have to do it within a span of 2 seconds, then if you kind of are sitting on it and thinking about it, it'll suddenly go away on you right when you're trying to trigger it, which could be a little bit of a pain. But probably no worse of a pain than the thing sticking on you. Alright, that's what I'm going to do. So, Guess what we're going to do is set a timer on this thing. So first I'm going to refactor or factor out this reset code so that we can call it in multiple places. Oh, wait a minute, wait. We do need to do that after. Okay. So now we'll have a nice function to reset all the state. And then, when the touch event starts right here, I'll start a timer. Actually, I think it officially starts right here. Yeah. So we'll put a timer here. And if that's not already cleared. Yeah, there shouldn't be any need to do that. Alright, set timeout, and we'll call this reset arrows, and we'll do, let's use a constant called reset timeout, and we'll set that to 2 seconds. And we need to, let me think, yeah, we need to set up a timeout tracking variable so that we can clear it at the start, because if they do a gesture really quickly, we want to clear out that timeout. And we will want to do a clear timeout right here. It should reset itself, which hopefully won't affect most people when they're doing a normal swipe gesture, because 2 seconds is a pretty long time. But it should stop the browser from ever letting those arrows get stuck. This isn't my ideal way of solving it. I would prefer to know why it's breaking, but since we can't know that, what we'll do seems to be working fine. Yep, just cancels after 2 seconds. Yeah, I think that's the right way to do it. It's a little bit of, like I was saying, it's a little bit of a touchy feature anyway. It doesn't seem to always work that great. And I would kind of prefer to get rid of it, but it's so handy when it works, so I'm just going to not worry about it. And we're going to go with this as our fix. All right. One 0 1 7. I better explain on that issue why I chose to do what I did. Alright, another bug down. What next? I'm gonna try to stay away from the crash bugs, things like that, because that's a little bit... Okay, this is an easy one. I figured these UI bugs are the right ones to be doing on the live stream because it kind of just lets you get a tour of how Beaker works internally. All right. So, permissions prompt is not properly handling a long URL, and so it's overflowing. I think the simplest way to do this is to first sort of trigger the event. And so I'm going to create a website that has a similar looking URL. Trigger that modal, or not really a modal, it's sort of a pop-up. And then I'll mess with the HTML and CSS and we can get that fixed. So to do this, I am going to first jump over to, interesting, what happened to the, oh, that's interesting. Why are we not seeing anything? Huh. Ran into an unrelated bug just poking around on other stuff. Should fix this real fast. So that looks like it's inside of the downloads page. Render downloads list component. And sometimes apparently state can be undefined, so let's fall back to empty string when that happens and see if that fixes this bug. Alright. Okay. That one was a freebie. Alright, now what was I doing? I was going to make myself a new debugging website, so we'll go ahead and throw this open. Call this and what icon should that get? Probably this smiling monkey face. And we'll set a directory. Okay. Copy that path so I can open it up in Sublime real fast. So he had an SSB URL, and I'm just going to jump over to the code on this, and I'm just going to change the scheme to, all I need to do is trigger this behavior, so I'm just going to add in a link real fast. Not a real link, just one that's long. And likely to trigger this pop-up. And there it goes. Perfect. So let's open up the dev tools for the entire shell window. As I mentioned yesterday, the way that Beaker works is it's actually sort of like a web app that runs websites inside of it. This is what Electron gets us. So in a way, what we see here is actually all of the browsing Chrome is all HTML and CSS and JavaScript, and then it manages these web views, which are another sort of namespace entirely, another JavaScript context and all that. I believe they're also even run on another thread, or perhaps even another process. Yeah, I'm pretty sure of that. So this is a prompt, and it is here. And I'm guessing we have it inside of that URL is inside of like a, no, it's not inside of a code or anything like that. So the perm styling doesn't have anything that makes me... I'm surprised it's not just breaking. So maybe we have some kind of style to control word breaking, but it doesn't look like we do. Alright, so option 1, we could set up like that. That's one option. Yeah, if you get something really absurdly long, that could end up overflowing entirely and causing a bit of a problem. So I do think we should go ahead and add this word-breaking behavior just so that it doesn't overflow, because we definitely don't want it to ever overflow. At the same time, we probably ought to limit how much of the URL we're willing to render, because we don't want this prompt to get so long that the entire prompt goes from, from here to being way down here off the screen, because then you wouldn't be able to access these controls to block or allow, and you're not getting interesting information anymore. So, step 1, I'm thinking we're going to set up this new word wrapping behavior, word breaking, and then we're going to, inside the code, look at the length of the URL string, truncate it if it goes beyond probably 256 characters. Seems like a reasonable place to do it. Yeah, 256, maybe not even that, maybe 128. So, let's first jump over to that CSS. That's going to be probably prompt. Yeah, all right. Word break word. Pretty simple. And then somewhere there is a permissions. Let's see. So that's going to be inside of the shell window folder. UI prompts permissions, and then let's see. The rendering for the permissions may actually be elsewhere because this is the generic container for the permissions rendering. So if we go to the we have inside of the library we have a giant perms rendering and management listing here. So every possible permission that can show up in that prompt shows up here somehow. And let's see, this particular one is, oh gosh, what is this particular? Open external would open this URL inside another program. Okay, we have some kind of, we're going to need to, interesting, does it just, yeah. I'm trying to remember how I wrote this code. So I think I'm going to want to just replace the behavior with a function as opposed to that. Open this URL in another program. Then program. So first let's see if we can just reproduce what we had before. Save that, and I believe param should be the URL they're trying to open. So there should be a pretty straightforward thing of just checking if it's a string. If it's not, convert it to a string, and then truncate if it's too long. Well, that didn't work. What is that? It's rendering the function. Why would it render the function that I provided? Do I need to change the... How strange. Why would it render the function? Wow. I gotta go check how this code works. Alright, time to look at the permission prompt. Code. It should be detecting that that's a function and calling the function. Not that one. So here's the code that executes that sort of custom logic. Gets the permission description here. So right, so it should be determining that that's a function and acting appropriately. So let's find out what's going on here.
Again, if anybody has any questions, feel free to chat it inside of the YouTube stream. Definitely happy to stop and answer any questions you got. So let's take a look and see what's going on here. Yeah, it's a function. And yet, it is returning that weirdness. Perm param, that looks fine. Why? Why? Why on earth would that happen? That's a really odd situation. Let's just trace through the behavior. So we're going to step through it. Ah, that's why I've got some custom logic right there that is stringifying it. Okay, yeah, what is the param then? Nothing. Got it. That's why you tend to want to separate your concerns. Special case for open external, that will do it. Well, in that case, I'm going to just stick with the previous implementation here so that the next guy can get confused by it. And then I'm just going to do that truncation right here. So I think I have a function already, a helper for setting a max length. Yep, shorten. So we're going to do shorten, and we're going to set the max length to 128 and make sure that shorten is actually imported. And if we're really going to test this correctly, we need to give it a long enough test case. So let's jump over to the code here. And let's just lengthen this URL a little bit. Okay, refresh the entire browser. And let's give it a shot. There we go. Okay. That should solve that problem. Okay, what's next? Again, I want to try to stick to UI. I might hit this one, denied permission error when none is set, because that's, yeah, let's go ahead and hit that one. This is a good one. Okay, so for some reason, on this page, the permission prompt for allowing, or really for selecting a DAT is failing. So there is a tool, a web API for choosing a DAT that looks like this. It opens up this little picker modal, kind of like a file picker. And there's an application which uses it, and for some reason that application is having a problem where whenever you click a button on the page, triggers that modal. For some reason it maybe appears for a half second and then it disappears. Sometimes it doesn't show up at all, and it tells you the user denied the request, which means that they hit like cancel or something. So it's when you click this, and alright, see, there's a little kind of a flash of a moment, but nothing appears to be happening. So if we open up the dev tools on this thing,
get this user denied permission. And there's no reason this should be happening based on what I saw in the source. Because if you look right here, that's their usage. Nothing wrong with it as far as I could see. I'm guessing that there's a bug that's getting triggered somewhere, causing the browser to incorrectly interpret it as the user denying permission. So let's see what happens. First of all, if I just run that, see, that works fine, right? But for some reason it's failing whenever it's triggered by the page. One theory I have is that it maybe has to do with the click event. Perhaps this is being rendered while the click event is still being handled. It seems unlikely, but it's possible, I suppose, in which case the cancel might somehow pick up on that click event that's still in progress. I hope that's not the case, but if it is, I suppose we could find some kind of way to delay the rendering of that picker to deal with that. So the first thing I guess I'm going to do is open up the code for when the user denied permission is actually triggered, so that we can take a look and see if there's anything unusual going on with the code right there. So this is some web API code that makes this a little fun. We'll start in the background process. There's this folder for all the different web APIs that are added to Beaker, so these are the ones that we have added to the browser. Here's the code set for the data archive web API, and select archive is going to be somewhere in here. There it is. Okay, so this could definitely be something being misinterpreted, because basically what's happening is if the shell modal fails for any reason that is more specific than just a generic error, or rather, if I get a generic error inside of the shell modal, it's going to give a user denied, which is a perfect recipe for the kind of problem that we just had, because it means that if I have a programming error somewhere in the shell modal, we could definitely be getting throw that's being misinterpreted here. So let's first take a look at what that error is. Alright. Since we're changing the background process, we actually have to restart the entire process. Okay, so nice. Let's click this, and same bug occurs, and here it is, error closed. Uncaught error closed. Well, closed is specifically thrown by the code. That's not like a typo or something causing that. That's actually a error which is intentionally thrown, I believe, because it's supposed to be triggered by the user doing something. So this is sort of backing up my theory that a UI event is being misinterpreted. So these modals, like the select archive modal, are actually part of the shell window code now. They used to be OS modals, but they were really slow. So at one point I said, all right, forget it. I'm just going to make custom modals inside of the UI. I think that was actually a pretty good move, because if you I just manually trigger it again instead of using the API, it comes up way faster. It used to take like a second and a half or so. It would take a second to do this little animation to scroll down, and then the page itself, like the content would have to load. Wasn't any good. So this just pops right up, and that's much better. Until you got a bug that makes it stop working. So let's take a look. Closed. Okay, but it wasn't canceled. It was canceled. Okay, so on-click cancel may be getting triggered. Let's find out.
What could trigger on click cancel while I'm looking? Oh, you know what? I have a new theory. I bet this won't be it. We'll find out in a second, but I have a feeling that what this is. What happens if I click outside? No? Okay. Never mind. Let's refresh and see if the... No, that's not it. Let's double check that, because that is really surprising. That's not it. Wow. Okay. That's a mystery. Let's do a quick search through the code, see where else canceled gets thrown as an error. Huh. This is mysterious. No, wait a minute. Closed, not canceled, closed. Right. Okay, it was closed, and I triggered cancel elsewhere. Closed is called not, or is thrown, yeah, it looks like in the management code, not in the modal itself. Yeah. Okay, so it's the force remove all is getting called somehow, and why would force remove all get called? It looks like one reason would be the key down getting called, and another reason would be the load commit. Oh no, I think I know what this is. This is an anchor tag. I'm pretty sure. Oh, need to open up. Yeah, I think I do know what this is. Yep. Okay. Alright, this is fun. So, I actually found out yesterday that I'm misinterpreting onload commit a little bit right now. So, what's going on here is whenever an anchor tag is hit, or a page refresh occurs, or a back or forward event, something like that, the browser interprets that as a sort of a page transition event. You know, you're navigating somewhere, and a couple of different events get fired to sort of handle that. Now, inside of Beaker, we have all of the page management code hooking into the different sorts of events that can occur for the life cycle of a page. So, for instance, here's when the DOM is ready, and we have some logic for reacting to that. When a new window is triggered by the page, so somebody like control clicks on something, there's code to handle that. Load commit is basically designed to tell you that the page has committed to loading something new, committed to creating a new navigation event. And originally I thought that would only get triggered if you were going to go somewhere else. Turns out that also gets, this is what I found out yesterday, that also gets triggered if you click on an anchor tag. So if you're doing an in-page navigation, that gets triggered, which we totally don't want to treat the way we're treating, because one of the ways that's getting interpreted is to say, okay, well, if you got any modals or prompts that are open, of course you want to close them, right? That's an obvious thing to do. And yet, that's how we're having this bug, because this is a click on an anchor tag right here, and even though, oh, come on, please show me the code. Even though I believe it's preventing the default behavior, let's take a look. Okay, so it's not preventing default. It's not preventing default, and so what happens is that we click this, the load commit fires, this gets called probably prior to load commit firing, but the modal opens, load commit does fire, and then we have our close all modals code right here, and then that ends up causing it to close and say, nope, done, and the error event gets thrown. So we need to reconsider this use of load commit. In fact, I noticed this yesterday. There's a couple of different things in here that maybe we don't want to do, maybe we do. Looks like this is all fine. Won't cause any harm. Same here. Yeah, so it's really just the closing any prompts and modals that's caused the problem here. And we only want that to happen if we're changing the page. So I need to diagnose or
rather kind of, how do I put this? I need to find which event I actually want to consider to be the we are changing the page event. And I think probably the simplest way to do that is to jump over to all of the different events that get fired and log them and narrow down which one looks right. So DOM ready is not going to be it. New window won't be it. Will navigate could be. Did navigate in page. Probably don't want that. Did start loading possibly. We know load commit's not right, but we do want to keep that in the list so we know when it fires, I think. Okay. I could also just try to distinguish inside of the load commit whether or not it's just an anchor tag click, which, based on what I saw yesterday, may be a little bit difficult. So I'm going to just log these. All right. When I click this, what all gets triggered? Did start loading, did navigate in page, and on load commit. Did any of them not get triggered? Will navigate didn't get triggered. Alright, let's find out. Yeah, will navigate. Okay, that's promising. Let's see about refreshes. But refreshes don't trigger it. Make this easy, why don't you? Okay. I guess next thing to do will be to take a quick look. I think I'm pretty sure that I'm using all the possible events that Electron has available for this. But wouldn't hurt to check. Could also be the case that Electron has another API event that I could put to work. So let's see, did finish load, fail load, or rather, they may have a parameter that we can push load to put to use. Did start loading, stop loading, get response details, did get redirect, DOM ready, page fab icon, window. Will navigate is not going to work because it doesn't fire frequently enough. Did navigate, doesn't do it. None of these are looking like what I need. I really need load commit to be the one. So now it looks like what we're going to have to do is stay with load commit, but I think we're going to have to, load commit actually only is on the web view. Yep. Yeah, I think we're going to have to try to suss out whether or not the load commit is a in-page event, or if it's actually changing the page or refreshing the page. That's gonna, that's tricky. Because I basically just want to ignore only if it's an anchor click. I want to handle it if it's a page refresh. I don't want to handle it if it's an anchor click. Maybe the trick to this is actually to listen to the before unload, which is on the web contents. This might be a winner, because really what I'm trying to do is handle whenever an unload event is occurring. So let's find out when that gets fired. Let's see if we already have the web contents. Doesn't look like it. have to do a little finagling if we're doing it this way, because the web contents is not immediately available. You have to wait for the DOM ready event to fire. Do I already handle the unload event here? I don't. Okay, we'll leave those logs in for a second. WCID. So right here. Again, if anybody, hey Mike, the anchor link was relative. It was just a pound sign, so he did, you know, pretty standard. Michael was asking, was that anchor link relative or absolute? So he has a pretty standard pattern that looks like this. And then when the browser if you mean by leaving the site, leaving the domain, as far as the browser, or at least as far as Electron is concerned, yeah. As far as Electron is concerned, and probably in many ways as far as the browser is concerned, it's more or less the same thing, I believe. They may have inside of Chrome some optimization so that it stays in the same process, but then actually destroys the process if you change the domain. Depends on how that affects their security policies. But at least from the way that it's exposed to me, there's no difference. And what I end up having to do is just look at the new URL versus the old URL, compare the domains, and work off of that. And actually, in 7ifso, we turn off live reloading. Yeah. All right, so. But I'm pretty sure if we can detect the unload event, that's specifically what we're looking for here is the unload event. Because if we could grab that, then we know that it makes sense to close all prompts. And event listener is not a function on web contents. Maybe it's just on. Maybe it's just the node style. Okay, so first, if we're lucky, it won't fire. Looks good, and then if we're lucky, it will fire. It did not fire. Let's see, did I get the event name right? Will prevent unload. Ah. This may not be the event we need. Okay, did navigate seems like it ought to be what we need based on that description. Let's check that. Do we have a did navigate in use yet? Huh. Yeah, I guess I didn't have a did navigate prior. That might be what we need. Is that a web view or a web contents thing? Let's see, did navigate. Yeah. Okay, this may be what we need. Let's give it a shot. Yeah, alright, let's see, does it trigger on a refresh? Yes, okay, that's our winner. Should also trigger whenever you do that. Yep, and whenever you do that. Alright. Good.
pretty straightforward. Just need to take out this stuff right here and put it over here. And that should fix this bug. Moment of truth. There it is. Alright. Now, let's see. It should be the case that if I refresh it goes away. Yeah! Alright. We made it. So that was 1032. We got some debugging in there still, so reset head app, a-p app, we don't want that, do want that. Okay, only close modals and prompts away from the page. Close 1032. Another one bats the dust. Another bug bats the dust. Alright. This might be a good one. The updater trying to download drafts of new versions, but that's an upstream one. That's going to be a whole ordeal. Okay, here's a couple of good ones. IP addresses are not being recognized as domains by the autocompleter. That's a total pain. And then, sort of related to that, after typing HTTPS, HTTP doesn't want to work. These are two bugs we found right in a row when we were doing an event in a peer-to-peer Web Berlin group, which, by the way, is awesome. And if you're ever in Berlin, try to go hang out with Lewis and the peer-to-peer web people. So, yeah, somebody had they had a seeder on the local network, which is cool, but somebody tried to type in the IP, didn't recognize the IP as a domain, so it tried to search, and then even to complicate it even more, because they had typed in HTTPS at one point, the autocompleter kind of kept on hijacking and saying, no, you want to go to HTTPS, even though they wanted to go to HTTP because you don't have SSL on the LAN. So. Right, so we really need to be a little more flexible about both those things. Let's start by trying to figure out what the IP address recognition is doing. So first I'm going to start a HTTP server. Alright, so first of all, I just typed that in, yeah, alright, so see, basically, it ought to be recognizing that IP. We had this logic inside the autocompleter where if it looks like an address, it's going to prompt by default that you go to the address. If it looks like a search, so, you know, like, hello world, right? That's probably a search. But Beaker.com, that's probably an address. So you see, as soon as we get something that looks sort of like it might be an address, it changes what the default is when you press enter. Default is to search. If it doesn't look like an address, default is to go to the address. With HTTPS, if it does look like an address. And so what we needed to do is recognize IP addresses as a likely candidate for being an address so that the default is correct. We also need it to suggest HTTP if it's an IP address by default, because more often than not, that's going to be the case. In fact, I can't even recall. I think maybe you can use SSL on an IP address, but it's going to be janky because I'm pretty sure the domain name is a big part of those certificates. All right, so let's jump over to the nav barcode.
And this is going to be somewhere in this. How many lines of code is this nav bar? Too many? Well, not so bad. 880. So somewhere in the auto-suggest code, it's autocomplete suggestion, but that's not the right one. Examine location input. This might be our guy. Is probably URL. Okay, so I guess what I needed is so here's my code that recognizes something that looks like a domain, which is basically if you don't have any spaces and then you have a dot with characters after it, probably a domain, right? That's it's a cheap heuristic, but let's, whatever, works. Pretty simple to get another regex in here for IP addresses. So what is the /d 13? Is that right? 13. That was not right. 133? How do you do does anybody remember how to do a range for how many characters are allowed instead of a regex? Pretty sure that, no. What is that? Syntax. I think I need to capture. It's an interesting suggestion. Westtodd is suggesting we just use the URL, the built-in URL parser to do it. I think if I remember right, well, shoot, might as well double check. If I remember right, there was a period where we had some non-standard URLs that it would choke on. In fact, it may even choke on DAT URLs, even though they look more or less like a normal URL should. So let's. Nope, didn't choke on that. Let's add a space. Oh, well, that's why. It's a little too generous. Okay, well, can't remember my syntax. Regex 101 is a really handy tool for working on regexes. I'm sure everybody has their own, but this is the one I like to use. It gives you a little bit of an explanation as to what you've typed in. Matches the quantifier between 1 and 3 times, right? Yeah, see, I thought I had that right. So 1, 2, 3 should match, except that it doesn't want to. Equal to 0 to 9, 1 and 3 times, as many times as possible, give it back as needed. Yeah, it's a full match, okay. So if I do this, we now have a new match. Yeah, totally. I got this. So, let's impose some limits on the length. Should be pretty straightforward. Dot, and then just a bunch of these. And there you have it. Now, do we want to have any flexibility? Like, do we want to handle that sort of business? Yeah, I think we do. So we'll take this off, and then we'll say that. So it has to start with an IP address, but as long as it does, we will consider that a good enough heuristic for saying, yeah, this is probably a URL they're putting in. Again, it really doesn't have to be perfect. It's all about just giving a sort of as convenient as possible behavior with its UI. regexpert.com. I have not. Let me take a look. Alright. Is this going to do some kind of like path of the, yeah, right, that's pretty sweet. Definitely like that for sort of an abstract learning, but this one I like a lot because it lets you, it sort of breaks down the rules that you're putting in there. Really handy, lets you see how it's matching. This one's really
a go-to for me, but this is pretty sweet if you're trying to understand the internal logic of it. With a good old flow graph. All right, let's do a browser refresh here. And what we should see is it's going to suggest the search right up till, didn't work. Okay, why didn't that work? Seems okay glancing at it. Oh, a little slash got in there somehow. All right, good. So now we're halfway there. Whoa, gotta fix the other. It should be also, yeah, until I put in a space and then it sees it as a search. Good, great, awesome. If somebody decides to use IPv6, they're going to have to file another issue because right now we are not dealing with that. It's yeah, it'll be good when IPv6 finally rolls out. I hope it means that we're going to be able to hole punch a whole lot better with dat. You know, we have to do all this hole punching nonsense because of network address translation. And if everybody just was able to have their own IP address, we wouldn't have that problem. At least that would be part of it. So that's 10.16. Closing. Okay. And good to know that the live stream is full of trolls. After typing HTTPS, HTTP doesn't want to work. Okay, so first of all, we should assume that if it's an IP address, it is a HTTP. That should be the assumption. So let's actually factor out that regex because we're going to need to run it again. Right here. Good. Assuming HTTP, that's exactly what we want. Guess I closed that server. I didn't. Oh, 40,000. Yeah, all right. Cool. Great. Awesome. Now just to make sure, if I happen to go to HTTPS 127.0.11, does it stick around in my history in an obnoxious way? No, I think we're good. Yeah. I think that's the behavior we want. You can always override it. By default, it's going to go to HTTP. And
Let's make sure it doesn't fight me in some weird way. Okay, great. So that was 1015. All right, a couple more. Might as well just get rid of what I have there. What else we got? This one might be worth it. Let's just pretend every one of these 100% CPU usage bugs is, let's just pretend those don't exist. Alright. Well, maybe we could go ahead and add in configurable search engines. It's not a bug fix, but hey, that'd be helpful. Let's check on this one real quick. So somebody is reporting that they can't select the text inside the library view, which would be a real pain if that were the case. I need to take a look and see what the person might be running into, because you should be able to. Yeah, you can. Oh, you can't copy it. Well, that's not cool. Huh. Oh, brother. So we recently just redid this section. It uses the ACE editor, and it's in read-only mode, which is a pretty obvious thing, right? But it looks like read-only mode does not make it possible to copy any of the code. Which, I don't know if that's what that person was referring to, but it is certainly a problem. Let's make sure that you can copy it inside of the editing mode. Because if you can't, then we actually have a bigger problem. Yeah? Why might that be? Let's start by looking at the styles here. Maybe there's some kind of style that's responsible for that. Could be this. Where did it? Oh, no, come on. Try getting rid of. No, 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 no. How does the rendering change? Clearly something is changing once the edit mode is on, right? That seems pretty obvious. But what might it be? Well, I guess if we're going to solve this one, we're going to need to jump into some of the ACE editor documentation. And actually the documentation is a little bit anemic. So we might actually need to jump into the source code. Let's jump into the kitchen sink and turn on read-only here and see if we have the same behavior. We don't. Okay. So this may not be an ACE editor problem. This may just be a Paul's code problem. Wait. No? Yeah, okay. Let's check inside of Beaker real quick, make sure it works there. So that's an edit mode, and if we turn on read-only... Okay. This looks actually like a Beaker problem. Interesting. Wait. What the heck? That's pretty inconsistent behavior. That is very inconsistent. This does look like it's something that ACE is doing, and it's just interacting poorly, especially with Beaker. But yeah, look at that. Oh man. Well, option number one, we don't use ACE editor for the view mode, but that would be pretty rotten because then the visual style of the read-only is going to be totally different than whenever you open up the editor. Not the worst thing in the world. We had it like that at one point because we have a syntax highlighter, right? So we could definitely make it work. I have to pull up some code that we stripped out earlier. Wouldn't be my favorite by any stretch. Other option is we dig around inside the internal code here, figure out what could possibly be causing this, but I'm going to be debugging a pretty big code base that I'm not familiar with, and that doesn't sound like a whole lot of fun or like it's going to be very efficient. I would bet you there's some kind of complex behavior for how ACE works. Okay. Let's try jumping into the issues real quick. Wes is saying, I think you want to know that you're in the read-only mode, so a big difference didn't seem bad to me. Yeah, I mean, it's not terrible. It's certainly one option. It'd be really crummy if this was the issue that forced me to have to go and rewrite a bunch of code, I'll say that. Let's take a look in the issues here and see if anybody else has run into this before. Well, copy should work in read-only mode. Okay, this may actually require us to go back and change how we render in read-only mode. And that's a shame, but I don't know that there's a much better way to deal with it. So we're just going to have to handle this bug a little bit later. That's going to be, got to talk to Tara about that before we make any moves. Alright, let's see if we can find a more fun bug. Changing the search engine would be good. Thought I closed this guy. That's nice of Nicholas to ask. I'll answer that question later. Circular symlinks crash Beaker badly. Well, alright. Let's pop into this one, see if we can't reproduce. So I'm guessing that the problem here is that I have some code that basically watches a local directory if you set it for a DAT and synchronizes it with the page. I don't know, Wes is asking, aren't all crashes equally bad? I don't know, man. Sometimes some crashes are worse than others. If it just like real fast goes down, hey, that's not so bad, but if it slows down the whole machine, now that's a bad crash. Alright, crash test symlinks. And I think we got a bug icon in here, don't we? No? Really ought to have a bug icon. Well, you always got to pick a good fab icon. Really, I've been using the bombs for my tests, so let's stick with the bomb. Alright, step one, let's create a symlink. Who here is confident that they get the syntax right the first time? Alright, I'm gonna say it's ln-s. Oh boy. I know this isn't right. I don't think I got it. Yeah, alright, whoever wrote the syntax for for the symlink ought to be taken out and shot. It's always the opposite of what you think it is. Alright. Yeah, it looks like it follows symlinks. Pretty sure we shouldn't do that. That's just asking for pain. I mean, it's nice that it works and all, but like... So I guess he had a circular one? That's what he was saying. Yeah, right, okay. Right, I mean the symlink, so this was correct. And so I guess you type in your target first, and then you type in where you want the symlink to be. That's just totally the opposite. Yeah, symlink and ln and tar. Two completely impossible to remember. Alright, so it looks like what he's saying is he has a symlink underneath, which I suppose there's some kind of good reason for doing that in some world, but detecting cyclical symlinks. I bet you if I Google that, we'll find a couple of conversations. Not really sure I want to have to get into that. Let's find out if there's a simple solution, because it seems like such an easy, common thing to happen. Detect circular symlink. Well, find does it, but don't want to use find. I hate to say it, but I think the answer is going to have to be that we don't. I mean, we could set up a way where we don't. I mean, we could, I guess, stop recursing after you've gone a certain depth. Certainly one way to do it. I suppose that's not the worst way to do it. If I remember right, Windows has a maximum tree depth, so we could just look for the maximum tree depth and that Windows uses and use that. Might be kind of a pain for some people, but on the other hand, the other option would be just not to support following symlinks, which probably isn't great. Let me think. It seems like the kind of thing that we should not support. I'm going to say let's not follow symlinks. Real simple way to fix it right there. So that's probably going to be, oh gosh, two different places that could come into play. My recursive watcher needs to not, actually that's Matthias's recursive watcher needs to not follow the symlink, and then I need to not follow it in the diff file tree algorithm. Let me think. Think of it, I've never had to try to come up with an algorithm that doesn't follow symlinks, so I'm guessing that I need like a read dir to not work. Actually, let's just open up the code, because if I'm doing a stat before I recurse, I can probably figure out if I'm looking at a symlink. So diff file tree is a handy little function, takes in two file system objects and compares them recursively, pretty straightforward. Yeah, it starts with a read dir though, and I think I'm going to have to add a stat on every one of those to detect if it's a symlink and not handle it. I'd prefer not to have to do an extra stat, but not sure there's an option unless I can change, unless there's like a parameter on read dir. Why is read dir getting called again? Alright, not gonna worry about that. Let's just take a quick look at the Node.js documentation. See if read dir has any sort of parameter for not handling symlinks, but I doubt it. Nah. Alright, no dice there. Let's take a look at stat. is symbolic link. There it is. All right. Step 1. Oh, yeah. Okay, we're good. Step 1, I need to symbolic link my implementation. Yeah, that's good. Step 2, we got a stat on this one. Now, here's a question. Do I just abort if there's a symlink? Do I treat it like an empty file or an empty folder? Empty folder would make sense. Probably going to be the source of some problems for people at some point. Empty folder sounds right. So that's what I'm going to do. Run the tests. Should probably throw in a symbolic link test in here somewhere. There we go, that's for standard. That's where you want your linters right there. It's not going to let me have that in multiple spaces. Fine, fine, fine. Tests all pass, okay. Next up, we need to description right in our tests. We need to add a. Okay, do I have? Yes. Okay. Wait a minute. No, I don't. Don't have a syntax for symbolic link, so we need to add one. Let's do this. So I'm just adding to the tests a syntax for mocking up a symbolic link in the test directory. So that we can make sure that it is treating symbolic links like empty folders. Then Nectar, I need see what we get. Whole bunch of new failures. Alright. Let's see. What's failing? I'd like you to abort the first failure, but you're not going to do that. Fine. Looks like every one of these is failing. Expected nothing, actually got something. Well, I don't know. We got 3 people on the channel. What do you guys think? Are we going to stick around to finish this one, or should I wrap it up? 'Cause I think I'm going to have to poke around at this implementation a little bit, figure out how to get sim linking to work right in my mock-ups. But yeah, I'll probably just fix up this algorithm so that it ignores symlinks, treats them like empty directories. No more circular symlink problems. And that's how this will end. I can keep going if y'all want, or I can wrap it up here. Anybody got an opinion on that? I think maybe we are. Yeah, let's wrap it up. Had a couple of good bug fixes done. Appreciate y'all joining me for this. We'll do it again. I don't know if it'll be tomorrow, but it'll be soon. And y'all have a good one. Enjoy your weekend.